Hello, good evening, and thanks again for another edition of Ideas Exchange. Tonight, we want to look at something that bothers a lot of elderly statesmen. It is about mistrust and what appears to be the public losing confidence in institutions and groups of people many people have held on as the last source of seeking for the best of advice and the intervention we need in case the country is divided. And don't forget that we have two major issues that are confronting us as a people. But one appears to cloud the most important one, which affects you and I, our pocket, and how we will survive, our future, and that of our children. And I'm referring to the crisis that has bedeviled this country, which many say is self-inflicted. You would recognize that government, since November, December last year, created the impression that after accepting that finally it will go to the International Monetary Fund to seek financial support, there was going to be a process to satisfy the Bretton Woods institution that Ghana is indeed ready with its own homegrown policies that will be bought into to help us raise the much needed funds to solve our problems. Not all our problems, but at least to cushion our economy for us to have some breathing space to rejuvenate and get back on the wheels. But that hasn't happened because as we speak, we know that the individual bond holders have rejected government's proposal for the debt exchange program. I'm making reference to the domestic debt exchange program. We know that a committee has immediately been formed to look at this, and this is outside what has been proposed. There's been widespread recommendation to government that hold a broad consultative meeting rather than the nucleus kind of engagement with people you can influence to able to get what you want. But unfortunately, the pensioners, the banks, the individual bondholders all seem to have rejected what government is putting on the table. But all what is happening is self-inflicted. For example, I'll share with you on the screen two posts by two members of parliament from both sides of the house. One is Ato Forson, and Ato Forson was very specific, trying to summarize what has been the bane of our problem. And I'm talking about the latest, which appears to have worried us. Now, you would tell from what Ato Forson has put on the screen that I'm sharing that many of the things we have done as a people over the past 4 or 5 years were self-inflicted. Problems we created for ourselves. And so you would see that it's listing issues from the size of government to the presidential staffers, to recommendations to government to downsize government's own response, and issues about the creation of ministries and other portfolios which were just duplicity of roles that government had created, which merely was creating jobs for the boys. All these have happened, and that is where we are. But what is most important is that the issue that is trending today has to do with one specific problem that many have referred to as the bane of the crisis we may face in the years to come if the public lose confidence in our pastors. For example, this appears to have clouded our bread and butter issues as a people, messed up our economy, the know-it-all posturing that has put the fate of our businesses, the survival of our pensioners, the future of our children, and the security of our country if things get to go the way they are. And I'm making reference to the National Cathedral project. It raises critical issues about religion, morality, ethics, and what we call public trust. We'll be delving much into this specific subject because I've spoken to two very influential people about what appears to be a worry that many are concerned about. And I'm talking about Professor Ajumanduya, who is the Chief Executive of the J.A. Kufuor Foundation. And I've also spoken to the MP for Ningo Pram Pram, who also expresses serious concerns and speaks directly to the conscience of our pastors. But before that, I want you to listen to this passionate cry by a pensioner who summarizes our self-inflicted problem that has brought us this far, and worst of it all, it appears as if we have roped in our religious leaders who sat on the fence and looked on, and today their integrity has been put on the line. Listen to this pensioner.
President, Nana Ado Adanko Akufo-Addo, I'm paying me bano boko. Within the ASP retired Franklin Nartey. Mesun Ghana ewo police mu 24 plus years. Na me gratuity me san kano me dito bond 2 years. Aka 1 year this year September. Year 2023. Na me bond no amateur. Wo adwina wo di ba ye say wakoboka ana wa bugana abofom enti me brama bre sika medi to bond no commercial bank no onfa mame we enye am robber ene ebe chimeji misika o man penia ya tu abama no se onhwe yeso emra wo fru plane 18,000 pounds an hour Nkrofo kachrew wanted. Emra wo fa so many ministers say omunu na woni omu betumi ayejuma. Nkrofo kachrew wanted. Ene your incompetence inti me bre amabre. Me disika yedi tua me ka say gratuity. Mi fa hwe mi honso no. Usi wafa. This is 2033. Se mi manu na opese omumbe jisika na minana no mo a minim. President, woni diemu Israel. Unuana ni bank edi enim edi loans no. Mfaso a wanya no Israel. Manu fa nsa mfaso no. Ekutu sikano mesikano mfama me nanado utrimu yedin papa obi a maye juma Ghana mra kire se 24 years plus no yentu ameka as a retired officer no usi untu ameka me nya 60 years ye nanado misra mibisa wo. Have you been a civil servant in Ghana before? Have you worked as a civil servant?
And I'm sure you have seen this video, and several of them are trending. I've actually listened to Kojo Mpienim, who is a known economist, very respected man in this country, was also spoken passionately about what is going on. I've heard about Senyo Hosi's concerns, and today, as I told you, that the individual bondholders held a meeting with the finance minister, and they have rejected the proposals just from the onset. I've seen several social media posts which appears to be banter from the finance ministry and reactions from those who are concerned. But how did we get here? Everything appears to be orchestrated, a well-planned strategy to rope in people of influence and find a way of shutting them up. I'll refer you to incidents before the 2020 elections, and the scenario is the same as in the National Cathedral project that we want to speak about. You'd realize that the EC set up a committee of eminent persons, and I'll just run through the names quickly, and you notice that the strategy was to bring all these influential people under one umbrella to create the impression that they were there to look at the interest of Ghana. But the incident that happened during or before, during, and after the elections, the protests, the fights, the killings, the comments, the threats, the appeals were ignored. Look at the names. Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, Chairman, National Peace Council. Sheikh Nuhu Shaributu, National Chief Imam. Mr. Sam Okujeto, who is a member of the Council of State. Nana Todadze, Archbishop Duncan Williams, who is the presiding Archbishop of the and General Overseer of the Action Chapel, Dr. Yaban, the TUC Secretary General, Reverend Charles Gabriel Palmer Buckle, we know him very well, Mr. Afelmoni, who is the immediate past GGA President, Gifty Afenidade, Professor Emmanuel Mate, Tony Forson, who is the Ghana Bar Association President then, and Eric Odrosai, who is a local government expert. Now, you would notice that all these people were supposed to be an umbrella body, just like the Otunfo committee that was set up, so that when we have crisis, we go to them to settle. The protest, you remember this demonstration that will be shared on the screen, when the political parties were protesting against EC's decision not to include other people or some documents in the processes of compiling voters register, the issues that happened at Techiman South after the elections. This committee never commented. As we speak, whether it has been dissolved, whether they knew what is happening, whether they reacted to it, we know that it's past. So why are we here? And these are the issues that I want you to think about. Now look at the board of trustees of the National Cathedral Project. You would notice that it is the same strategy. They put together every influential pastor who matters. And look at the names there. Apostle Kofi, Professor Kofi Onyina, Chairman of the Church of Pentecost, Charles Palmer Buckle, Catholic Archbishop of Cape Coast, Most Reverend Bishop Justice Ofe Akrofi, Reverend Professor Emmanuel Mate, Reverend T.K. Awatre, Reverend Cephas Omenyo, who resigned yesterday, Professor Mensah, Pastor Mensah Otabil, Archbishop Nicholas Duncan Williams, Reverend Dr. Joyce Ayi, Bishop Doug Howard Mills, Reverend Iswid Anaba, Reverend Victor Kusi Boateng, and whose name has generated the controversy to its limit, and Reverend Dr. Frimpong Manso. All these people were or are members of the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral Project. Some of them have been put on boards, and because of that, they have been silent since 2018, pretending they don't know what is going on in Ghana. And this is where we are. Serious economic crisis that is grinding this country to a halt. And we are told banks are afraid some of them may fold up because of their capital ratio issues if the domestic exchange program involves them, but they have actually rejected it already formally through a notice. And so today I went to a respected man who is a co-founder of the Center for Democratic Development, and of course, who is the chief executive of the J.A. Kufuor Foundation, Professor Bafo Ajumanduya. My first question was, how do you feel as a statesman that gradually we are eroding institutions and groups and persons Ghanaians respect, the youth respect, and now clergymen have lost it, if not all, almost completely? And this was his first response.
Well, I think you are really raising a question about individuals in societies we normally refer to as people with convening power, convening authority. People who, when they call you, because of the deep respect and reverence you have for them, you will go. And every society, from traditional societies even to modern societies, you have people just like that. So in cases of crisis, conflict, these are people we turn to for mediation, for conflict resolution, and for the making of peace. And I think in our own recent history, there are some examples to show. If you don't mind, I can cite the case of the Asantehene when he was called upon to solve the Yendi crisis, and a few other things have happened by other prominent people. So listening to you, I think the concern is that maybe somehow gradually we are losing such individuals in our society, and also some groups. And I suspect strongly the current case of religious leaders who have been dabbling in politics of late, and the politicians attempt also to engage them in things that are not religious. All these things are giving some real concern to people, that perhaps people that we revere, people that we can call upon for mediation, all such people are becoming compromised. if that is your question, then of course I fully agree that gradually we are beginning to lose that kind of group of people, individuals, because I think somehow everybody seems to be consumed by the politics of the day. It seems to me politicians are eagerly seeking to capture such individuals to their side or for the sake of winning political power. So those who are not strong enough get easily compromised, and they lose the kind of respect and reverence that they deserve in society. And that certainly is a concern I also have. With specific reference to the cathedral, my thinking is that the whole project was ill-conceived, because, you know, the president announced it publicly that it was his personal wish to give to God for winning the presidency, to thank God for that. And that immediately, for me, made it a private undertaking. So initially, my thinking was that this was a private initiative, which means that funds will be mobilized privately. And I think they attempted that, because I understand that they engaged somebody, a fundraiser, to do that. And perhaps because the private fundraising did not go well, perhaps that's why they then started to decide to use state money for what they called seed money. And apparently this so-called seed money was in the national budget. And we wonder even how Parliament as an institution signed on without raising questions about that. So legally, I guess the government did the right thing because it got approval from Parliament. But having said all that, the fact is that the controversy reflects a very flawed national project, badly conceived and badly executed. And the government succeeded in lining up some respectable individuals, as we referred to earlier, to be the face of the project. And from what we are hearing from members who have resigned, major decisions regarding the project were not even taken by the Board of Trustees. It seemed like there were some private individuals behind it who were making all these decisions. So from the perspective of governance, good corporate governance, that is a big low, you know, for it. So I'm not surprised that things are beginning to unravel. I'm not surprised that the individual who have taken up the mantle to research and reveal certain things is giving the public the kinds of information is providing. Because I think the project has lacked all the necessary frameworks for good management. If it was a public project, procurement issues and all those kind of things, I think were not followed. That's why I think this controversy is here. As I said, if it were a public project, the approach would have been different. So mixing private sentiments and desires with public resources and topping it with religious faith is what has produced this kind of tragedy. In a way, it's a tragedy, because the concept itself may not be that bad. And I even wish that the president has said, look, this nation, we don't even have a decent conference facility. The one built by former President Rawlings in the 1990s is run down. And I personally know occasions where certain big international organizations had wanted to have their conference in Ghana, but they couldn't have enough facilities. So I personally believe that there's a strong need for a national conference facility, conference center. I go to some countries, Tanzania, they have a beautiful conference facility. So you see conferences going there, and that is conference tourism. You make money out of that. If that had been the concept, and you have attached it with some reflective room, wherever, I think the marketing of this project perhaps would have succeeded, you see. But mixing religion with the state, I'm not surprised this confusion has emerged.
So one key word is tragedy. So, Prof, could it have been that they were misled or they allowed themselves to be used? Or they only wanted to be in the good books of government for their personal interest, or they forgot the word of God to stand by it and speak truth to power?
You see, I mentioned earlier this effort by politicians to co-opt individuals that they find some credibility for in terms of whatever agenda that they have. And this is a very clear example of that. And I don't know if the full intentions of the conceivers of the project were made clear to these people who were lined up to be on the board. I don't know. I don't know what was presented to them, whether the true picture, the true intentions were shared with them, or they were simply, quote unquote, fooled by what they saw as a great project to honor the good Lord, you see. So I can sense that kind of confusion in them. Because from what is coming out now, it seems to me people like Doug Mills and the latest, the moderator of the Presbyterian Church, Professor, who has also resigned, are strong indications that something was fundamentally wrong with the constitution of the board in terms of messaging of what the true intentions for this project was. The intention, as I say, could be good, but because somehow some people think it should be in their bosom, it should be their private initiative, whilst at the same time seeking to get endorsement from the public as well as the religious bodies, that triple kind of intersections is what seems to have created this. So sure, once your intentions are not clear and you are not being transparent with those who want to work with you, then the issue of corruption and bribery certainly will come. Because we have been told that they didn't know how much or how the contract for the designs were made. These are board of trustee members talking. They didn't know that, which means they never went to the board for review, ratification, or discussions before approval. All these things were not done. Okay, so I think the fact, let's go straight to the point. The cathedral has been a badly conceived project, badly executed project, fraught with corruption and so many things that certainly beats everybody's imagination.
You are listening to Professor Bafo Ajumanduya, who is the Chief Executive of the J.A. Kufuor Foundation. You'll be part of this conversation, and the numbers you would be calling are 020-4155-888, 020-4155-888, or 020-4155-944, 020-4155-944. The last question I put to Professor Bafo Ajumanduya is, what is the way forward? We have had the Council of State, which is sitting on the fence, and to some extent, it appears the Supreme Court also created a problem, because I remember from the onset, a group went to the Supreme Court in an attempt to block the execution of the project at its current site. But it gave the backing to government, and that is where we are. And this was a Supreme Court ruling on a case that was going to affect houses which were built for judges at the same spot. All of them razed to the ground, and as we speak, we only have dug holes at the same site as Doug Mills said would represent something that is just unacceptable. And Prof's response was quite loaded.
You see, you're talking about the petition to the Council of State. We also know that an individual went to the Supreme Court challenging this project on the basis of the serious conflict between the state and religion. Because in most democracies, efforts are made to put the two issues separate. In other words, state and religion. Normally, you don't mix it. It doesn't mean if you're a president, you don't go to church. You go to your church, okay? But you don't bring your church to the center of state machinery, okay? You can go to your church on Sundays and come back to the state house, whatever you call where the president says, and perform your secular work. But when this case was sent to the Supreme Court, you know the outcome. They more or less endorsed the notion that there was nothing wrong with the state involving itself in this kind of enterprise. So in that respect, there seems to be some legal backing from the judiciary. Now to your question about what to do going forward to get the public confidence. It's a tough one because at the moment, if you look at the economic conditions in the country, nobody would like to throw $400 million at a structure that will not give immediate returns in terms of economic returns. So immediately, if you want to test the public, I'm sure you are going to get the results that no, there's a big, maybe 90–80% of people will say it doesn't make sense to throw that much money unless you're able to raise private funds. But public funds, I don't think this government will ever get a support from the public at this time. So what do? They dug deep into the earth. They demolished some buildings. Even that location of the project itself is contestable. Not in terms of those who own the plot, but why do we even locate such a major project at the center of city where traffic is even a problem? We could have chosen some 10 miles out of the city, build a new highway, then that becomes another tourist attraction. Easy to access. Anyway, these are all my own comments. But the fact is that they've taken the place has been dug. I don't know how deep it is. It's a sad situation, and I don't believe, despite what the president says, that he will do it before he leaves. Well, maybe he has money that we don't know about, but I don't believe they can complete that project. So if it is going to remain a national project, then a national decision through Parliament should be made as to how we continue with it, how long we are capable of making sure it works, and all. Reconstituting the board and making it a truly national project. That, for me, is the way to go. But if it is redefined again to be a private project, then, of course, they have to source for private funds. And then all the ancillary questions about the space being used and paying compensation for those who lost their property, all those then becomes an issue for the private investor to deal with. As for the land, we can say the government has graciously donated the land to that private entity. That, I think, should be a way forward. But if we still want to say it's a national project, national cathedral, and therefore we all have a duty to pay 1 cedi a month or whatever that they said earlier, then I think the whole approach, the whole strategy for executing, the whole management structures will have to be changed to make it truly national.
So that is Professor Bafo Ajumanduya. So obviously this was self-inflicted, and we had people who have so much power, so much influence, who have allowed themselves to be used. And many people are telling me through the text messages I'm receiving that don't have sympathy to any of those who served as board of trustees because they knew from day one what they were doing. And long before the expose about the double identity pastor, who we are told has different signatures to different documents or accounts that have been exposed after the recent expose, that they had known the problems, the conflicts, the corruption-related issues, the procurement-influenced decisions that were not coming from them. But they kept quiet because they were benefiting. Otherwise, they are not true men of God because they were not thinking about what God stands for. That's why we have the topic, religion, ethics, integrity, and the waning public trust. You'll be calling us on 020-4155-888, 020-4155-944. Don't forget that we would also be speaking to Sam Nartey George, who is the MP for Ningo Pram Pram. I'm told somebody is on the line already. Good evening, and let's know where you called from, sir. Hello, good evening. So while we are waiting for the call to be connected,
Good evening,
yes, good evening, and thanks for your time. Where are you at the moment?
I'm calling from Babieni.
From Navrongo.
Babieni.
Bebiani, okay, thanks to hear from you. We have the Supreme Court, we have the Council of State, we have the Electoral Commission, Parliament, and then the clergy, and maybe our last resort will be our traditional authorities. What is your view on, so far, what you've heard Professor Ajumanduya say about what he thinks could be the best way forward?
Okay, thank you very much. I much appreciate about your panel, the one who just spoke. The issue is that I'm much perturbed about what our clergy, what our church leaders are doing. You see, we are in the era of difficulties, of which we are expecting our leaders who happen to be our church leaders to speak truth to every leader in this country, from the presidency to the MCs to the chiefs. Look at the way and the manner in which our national resources have been misused. At this time, Kenoforiata is still at post. You are doing nothing. You who are not speaking. I quite remember Muhammad's time. Look at the way you, these clergy, you spoke against Muhammad.
Okay.
What is happening now?
All right.
So I can see that our leaders are not helping us at all.
Virtually, you are saying they have been compromised, and so it affects the integrity and the position they hold. Thanks for your time.
It affects their integrity. Thank you.
Right. Let's speak to another person who is just on the line. Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, if you can raise your voice and let's know where you called from first, and then make your point.
Okay. First, I'm Jatu Kobina Farouk.
Okay.
And I'm calling from Northern Region.
Right.
Bimbla. And again, I'm the Bimbla NDC Deputy Communication.
Good. So let's know briefly your opinion.
Okay. Matters regarding to the National Cathedral. In fact, to my observation, it is nothing than wickedness. For instance, I'm a believer of what? The Almighty Allah. And I want to offer my people a mosque purposely for worshiping. And the people told me they are not interested. What am I going to build the mosque to benefit what? It is the people who are going to worship the God. And at the end of it, I will have the benefit. Yet the people are telling me they don't need it. And I'm forcing myself to build it. At the end of it, what am I going to gain from? If you look at what Nana Akufo-Addo-led administration is doing today, in fact, if Ghanaians had known, this would have been the channel Nana Akufo-Addo is used to rule us. I think Nana Akufo-Addo would have been a president.
Okay.
But the most painful aspect of the story is that when people lose their credibility, they pretend, go overdoing certain things. And this is nothing but what? Incompetency.
Okay,
and
thank you very much. Sorry, we have to end it because we have other people on the line. Good evening.
It is nothing but what? Incompetency. Okay, and thank you very much. Sorry, we have to end it because we have other people on the line.
Okay, so let's speak to somebody else because it looks like there's an echo at the background. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, it appears you sound very faint at your end. Either you raise your voice or perhaps we drop the line and then you call back. Let me hear you again and where you are speaking to us from.
Let me come in. Okay, am I okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Go ahead, sir.
Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead, sir. This is TVXYZ Ideas Exchange.
You're framing. It was TV. You can say free WhatsApp to me. Yeah. Yes, papa na oba bekasa no friend bekasa. E na si papa. Mpanyi fo no ya o Ghana. Mo kan no kre. E na so fo no mo kan no kre. Papa nyame shira. Was kasa wa ba beka. Ye na ya te di ndi e koso. Bible kra kase. Ye Awurade se yemma mo ma kom de won yemma won ti ani ni. Na se e kom di Ghana fo. Na ye se ye disika e di pa usti cathedral member here. Enya na na Nyankopon ho hwehwe.
Yo, mpacho me.
Nyankopon hwehwe se mo ma e kom de won ye ba mo won ti ani ani. Ndi papa nyame shira mo.
Yo, nipa na yene kasa yene your friend Professor Bafo Ajumanduya, or a chief executive for J. Kufuor Foundation. But I've heard somebody has joined us from Takrady. Good evening.
Yeah. Good evening.
Yes, you sound very loud and clear from the Western Regional Capital.
Yes, please.
Right.
My name is Aaron. My name is Aaron Fritz Adol. We have missed you, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead and make your point. You have 1 minute.
You see, the professor is trying to be diplomatic with those people who have resigned. You see, those people know what is coming. It's not about that with the reverend who have changed his name like a chameleon. There is something there. That's why they are rushing to resign. They should speak to the truth. Me, I'm urging those the Okudoto and the parliamentary to deep searching of those people, because I can see something coming that they knew that maybe they would discover their bad deeds. That's why they are resigning.
Okay, thank you.
They should investigate all of them because they knew. See, Nana Akufo-Addo contacted those people to help me to come to power. And they look at when the people are complaining about the cathedral, those people will come out and say many things, including my own Catholic bishop.
All right. So let's take.
They should investigate all of them because
right.
It's not only Kwesi.
All right, thank you very much. So we are picking somebody else on the line because we have some Nartey George who will also be speaking to us on this program. This is Ideas Exchange, TVXYZ, and somebody has joined us from the Northern region.
Hello?
Good evening.
Hello?
Yeah, good evening, sir. Go ahead.
Hello?
I can hear you, sir. Speak.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm fine.
In fact, I'm speaking from the Northern region. Please, what I want to ask the pastors, I said what I want to, hello?
Sir, we can hear you. Make your point in 30 seconds.
What I want to ask the pastors is that, do they know that if you cheat somebody, okay, do they know that if you cheat somebody, tomorrow judgment day you are going to pay for it? Because it is our taxes, and we are losing the thing, and we are feeling angry, and you are chopping, saying that you will not, you have to pay the cathedral. What doesn't like what is
okay?
What is false?
I think you made your point. Unfortunately, your line is not too clear. So let's pick the last person, Koku. Mohammed is speaking to us. Mohammed, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, Mohammed, where are you exactly?
Yeah, I'm in Boku in the Upper East region, Mohammed,
Okay, so make it in 1 minute. I have to speak to some Nartey George.
Okay, no problem, sir. Yeah, good evening to our fellow viewers and you, Mr. Host.
Good evening.
Yeah, imagine you making a promise that you are going to build a national cathedral. You make a promise to God, but not from the taxpayers' money. You can imagine the hardship we are going through. It's almost 6 years today. The place is like a galamsey pit. So see what is going on. At least I was told through a very confirmed information that every month, $40,000 is being paid to the contractors. So imagine this almost 6 years.
Right.
And nothing is done there. See the distraction which happened at the site and the rest.
Okay.
Where are we going?
All right. So I want you to end it on that note. Where are we going? I'm sure Sam Nartey George will let us know where we may get to from here. And the program is Ideas Exchange here on TVXYZ. Will come your way every Wednesday between 8 and 9 p.m. Sam Nartey George was with us to answer questions that we put to him about his response to the reaction by Reverend Kusi Boateng, or what we know now is Kwabena Edu Jemfi. So one person, two names. And Sam Nartey George's response to his reaction was quite strong. Listen.
Someone who is very particular about the image of the church. There is the perception that this is an assault on the church. I have spoken very extensively with my friend and brother Samuel Okujetua Blakwa, and clearly Sam is also someone who is a Christian and a son of the church. This has absolutely nothing to do with an attack on the church. This actually has everything to do with our upbringing in the church and what the church has asked us to do, and being good ambassadors of the church, ensuring that the right thing is done at all times by all people. And the Bible tells us that God says his house shall be a house of righteousness. And if we want to be the salt of this earth as Christians, we have a responsibility to ensure that we lead by example. The early church and the title Christians came by the actions of the followers of Christ. And so in Antioch, they were called Christians, Christ-like people. And so we would ask ourselves, how would Christ have behaved? How would Christ have reacted to the issues that we are hearing? Would Christ have given thumbs up to the board of trustees of the cathedral if he found out, or if he was present and found out, that the amount of monies that have been sunk in, all you have there is what is reminiscent of a big galamsey pit? Would Christ be excited about the fact that people who are revered and are supposed to be his mouthpieces and oracles have been embroiled in such acts of financial malfeasance? Would Christ be happy about the things that the Bishop Dag Heward-Mills has raised about the cost, the design and procurement processes underway with the cathedral? Will Christ be happy about the issues that Dag Heward-Mills, the bishop, raises about the fact that the trustees are in the dark and other people who are not publicly known as trustees are making decisions in the names of the trustees? Will Christ be happy about that kind of administration? Again, we will want to ask ourselves, as men of God and women of God on that board of trustees, not all of them on that board of trustees, first and foremost, are pastors. There are people who are not necessarily pastors of churches on the board of trustees. I mean, for example, someone I have a lot of respect for, Madame Joyce Ayi, she doesn't pastor a church. So that's that we have to segment it. But for example, Bishop Dag Heward-Mills will not accept some of the things that are going on with the building of this so-called cathedral. And I use that advisedly because that's not a cathedral, that building. He wouldn't accept it in the Lighthouse Ministries. He clearly would not accept any of those. Those will not happen. When a man I hold in very high esteem, Apostle Opoku-Onyenah, I mean, for me, he's arguably the most celebrated, charismatic man of God. I mean, amongst all the archbishops and bishops, Apostle Opoku-Onyenah for me is the most accomplished. I mean, and a man of great reputation, and a man who is deep in the Word of God. You know, to have achieved the academic excellence and laurels he has, and to excel in ministry the way he has, to rise to the rank of being the general overseer of the Church of Pentecost is something that I don't take for granted. And I mean, he's someone I work very closely with on the bill that I'm sponsoring in Parliament. And so he's someone I have a lot of respect for. And I know that under his watch, he would never have allowed any of these financial malfeasances or he wouldn't have sat aloof if accusations of this magnitude came up when in the Church of Pentecost when we were putting up any project. Never. He wouldn't have accepted it. Pastor Mensah Otabil would not have accepted any of these kinds of allegations to go without a scrutiny in his church. So then why should we allow this happen with public taxpayers' funds? That's not who we are as Christians. That's ungodly. It's not Christ-like. Christ entreats us and demands of us as Christians to be transparent in our dealings, to be exemplary in our way of life, so that people would look at the way Christians are building a cathedral and use that as a yardstick to measure governments when governments are undertaking social projects. But if the church is being used as the face of a project and it is mired in so much malfeasance and corruption, you can't put it anyway. Corruption. How will the church have the moral right to call politicians to order when politicians begin to do what politicians are known to do? Absolutely. Christ did not keep quiet. A young Jesus went to the temple with his parents and sat and had an open debate in public with the scribes, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were the elite. They were the men of God. He debated scripture with them. And when Christ grew and came back into the temple and realized that the temple had become a place of trade and not a house of worship, he publicly rebuked those who had turned the house of God into a house of trade and said, my Father's house will be a house of worship and prayer.
And that's Nartey George, MP for Ningo Pram Pram. So I asked that, could it have been an entrampment? Because we know the case of what happened before the 2020, and I cited the committee of eminent persons, Jean Mensah and the people put together, that happened to be just a ruse. And Sam George again was very pastoral in his response.
Look, it breaks my heart when I see social media posts of people attacking the persons of many of these fathers, because I know them personally. I know their walk with God. I know that they have absolutely no need whatsoever of anything from anybody. There is nothing government will offer to this revered men of God that they need. They've seen it all, they've done it all. These are men who have given of their youth, sacrificed their youth for the propagation of the gospel. These are men who have been blessed by God. And that's why I sit back and ask myself, I get it at times when they speak and say, because the president made a request. But would you follow the president to damage your reputation? To throw away all that you have done and worked for? Would you follow the president? And because of respect for the president, cast away all that you have toiled for and labored for? I mean, no. And that's why I'm calling out to them and reaching out to them and saying, look, they are our fathers. We have respect for them. It is untenable. There is no explanation. It is ungodly. This is not what they taught us in Sunday school. You understand me? They owe it to the faith. They owe it to themselves to be able to look the president in the face, like, and I celebrate Bishop Dag Heward-Mills for what he's done, right openly and call out the president and anybody that is involved in malfeasance or overseeing such great corruption and grand larceny in the name of God, and tell them this is ungodly, this is not what our faith stands for. Look, and I do not want to go into an open challenge with my apostolic fathers and the fathers of the faith, but I can say on authority, and I can say this without any equivocation, and none of them would be able to, in sincerity, come out and say that Sam George is lying or wrong. when I say that none of them was aware of the payments that were made to the architect and the consultants, over 114 million. None of them was consulted before payments were made in that nature. The board of trustees was not aware that private entities were loaning money and being paid money. So if you are the board of, and what I'm saying is already borne in testimony by the letter that Dag Heward-Mills wrote. So it is not as though I am engaging in speculation. I mean, Bishop Dag Heward-Mills' letter is evidence of it. And so, on what basis would my very good father, Istudanaba, allow his reputation, what he has done for the North and Bolgatanga, should not be eroded by individuals who have their own parochial political interest and are hiding behind his good name, to have all kinds of young people cast aspersions as to who he is and what he stands for. And those are the things that are paining and breaking the hearts of myself and my brother Okujeto, and saying, look, they must disassociate themselves from this. And they must not just disassociate themselves from it, they must go ahead to call for a proper investigation, because their reputations are at stake. There must be a proper forensic audit of individuals who have been involved. We've seen a letter by Reverend Kusi Boateng. I don't know whether to call him Reverend Kusi Boateng or Edu Jemfi. I don't know which of them to call him. But whichever name he chooses to be called by, he has not substantially addressed the issues that have been raised of multiple identity. Address the issues.
In Fanti, that's where I grew up. There's something they call Simpa Penin. It's just unfortunate that people we have respected over the years will allow themselves to be put or pushed to the corner. We'll be wrapping up shortly. But I was trying to find again from some Nartey George that Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa, because when they went to the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice, I saw him there with Okujeto and lawyer Eduji Tamaklu. So I said, are you surprised that when there was a call to the IGP that somebody has multiple identities, the IGP's office has not ordered that he's invited or perhaps arrested by now, because we know that he has different TIN numbers for different identity cards, which is criminal by nature. And he had a simple response with a loaded message, and that's how he wraps up the conversation I had with him.
Oh, I can't not be surprised. I mean, his relationship with the president and the vice president is well known, is well documented. And I mean, the president and the vice president do not, look, they are the last people to expect a demand of accountability from, because the president and the vice president will fail any test of accountability. So, I mean, and that's why, for me, as Christians, the Bible enjoins us not to be equally yoked with unbelievers. The things that the men of God stand for do not represent the things that the president and his vice president stand for on this cathedral matter at the very least. And so why are they being equally yoked with it? And for me, as a son of the church, I see what this is doing to the church. I see how young people are getting disillusioned and asking themselves, is it worth it being associated with the church? They should not throw away 30, 40. Some of these men have spent 40 years of their life in ministry. Some over 40 years. I mean, we have respect for them. The Archbishop Duncan Williams, massive, massive patriarch of our faith. Why should his name be dragged down? Yeah, we know the relationships that may exist between individuals on the board, spiritual sons, but look, we're talking about images here. We're talking about the faith here. Even as a father, as a biological father, when your son does wrong, you rebuke your son. How much more your spiritual son? And several times, our spiritual fathers call us and rebuke us for erring. So it is not to say that once someone is your spiritual son, you cannot rebuke the person. In fact, the Bible tells us that foolishness is in the bone of a child, but the rod of correction drives it away. So as children who err, But that's why we have fathers, you know.
So they are failing.
Well, it's not in my place to pass judgment. It's not in my place to pass judgment on the fathers. But traditionally, we have a saying that if you're an elder and you see children eating python and you don't stop them, when they are counting python eaters, they will count you amongst it. You understand me? And so we must be careful, you know. We must be careful that we do not allow the heathen to rage and allow the people imagine vain things about our faith. This is the time for us to walk our talk as Christians. I mean, that building that is being touted as a cathedral, none, and I repeat, none of the fathers will go there and hold a service. They all have their domes. If you're not careful, you're putting up an edifice that people of questionable character will come there and begin to occupy and hold all kinds of meetings. I can list all the fathers on that board. None of them will solemnize a gay marriage in their churches. Archbishop Duncan Williams will never do it. Bishop Dag Heward Mills will never do it. Pastor Mensa Ontabe will never do it. The Methodists, the Presbyterian, they will never do it. But when you have a building where anybody of any faith, or whether they have faith or are faithless, can even come and use the building, how would they sit tomorrow when they sit in their domes and see that what they built is being used for the solemnization of LGBTQ marriages or gay marriages? What will be their legacy? These are questions they need to ask themselves. These are deep things they need to think about. It's not about the symbolism. The symbolism is the form. We're interested in the substance. The substance is what matters.
Sam Nartey George is the MP for Ningo Pram, ending tonight's edition of Ideas Exchange. My name is Eric Ahianyo. Don't forget, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, there will be a repeat of this program. Next week, Wednesday, we are meeting again at 8 p.m. And thanks again to Professor Bafo Ajumanduya for that very instructive conversation he had with us. And for all those who were able to call into this program, we say thank you and have a good night.